Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. The West Bengal assembly elections were the most hotly contested ones during this poll season. The Trinamool Congress that had been in power in Bengal for 2 terms, that is nearly a decade, had been facing anti-incumbency and a strong opposition from the BJP, that is the Bharatiya Janata Party. Plus, a number of TMC leaders had left the party to join the BJP. This included senior leaders including Suvendu Adhikari and Mukul Roy. During the campaign, BJP used its top leaders like Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah to do massive rallies in the state. Amit Shah alone did over 50, including several roadshows. The party ran a campaign that highlighted the corruption of the TMC and used divisive politics, Hindutva narrative, and chants of Jai Shri Ram in an attempt to polarize voters. On the other hand, we saw Mamata Banerjee take on the challenge head-on. Her slogan, Khela Hobe, meaning game on, became viral to the point that even the opposition was using it. She told the people that the BJP's politics is communal, and they are outsiders who don't understand the culture and the essence of Bengal. During the campaign, several BJP leaders had claimed that the party would win over 200 out of the 294 seats in the state. But this did not happen. It was the TMC that won again and came back to power for a 3rd term. The party won a total of 213 seats and BJP managed to win 77. In this episode, we take a look at the reasons why this happened, how TMC managed to come back to power, and the lesson this election holds for the BJP. And to understand this, we speak to Shantanu Chowdhury, who writes on West Bengal politics for the Indian Express. And he first explains the biggest reason that worked in the TMC's favor.
Well, I think the only thing that has, was the biggest advantage for the TMC is that the BJP did not have a face to take on the charisma of Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. The party depended heavily on central leaders, dependent on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, and BJP National President JP Nadda. They had campaigned extensively in Bengal, but they did not have a leader from Bengal who would have taken on Mamata Banerjee. This is one segment where Mamata Banerjee was clearly ahead than her rival. So I think the BJP lacked a face from the Bengal to take on Mamata Banerjee.
And this lack of a strong face is reflected in the results, because most of the BJP heavyweights in the state lost their seats to the TMC. This includes Union Minister Babul Supriyo, Party MP Lokit Chatterjee, and Swapan Dasgupta, who was touted to be one of the key faces of the BJP in Bengal.
So clearly, the BJP leaders who had a Bengali image in West Bengal did not do well. This is also the fact that the BJP did not also give them the importance they had given to the central BJP leaders. They had campaigned in the state only after their names were announced for Swapan Dasgupta and for Babul Supriyo. Lokit Chatterjee also was MP from West Bengal. She won the election in 2019 in Lok Sabha polls. But then again, she was not the face of the BJP in West Bengal. So clearly the BJP did not have one face which could have taken on the Mamata Banerjee.
Shantanu says that the BJP misread this entire campaign. And that was because they were dependent on the inroads that they had made in the state in the 2019 general elections. During that time, they had won 18 Lok Sabha seats. So based on that, they thought they could win the majority of the assembly seats this time.
But the thing is that 2019 was the Lok Sabha elections. People of Bengal had voted for the Prime Minister or voted for the party which will have its Prime Minister at the center, not for the party which will have no chance of electing a Prime Minister at the center. So it was a vote which was for the BJP because of this reason. But this time, they had voted for someone who will stay as the Chief Minister of Bengal. So clearly, they didn't see any alternative to Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. Who is the alternative of Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee? There was no clear-cut answer because the BJP kept on saying that we will decide on who will be the Chief Minister only after the election.
Moreover, organizationally, BJP is not nearly as strong as the TMC in Bengal. BJP has only been trying to gain ground in Bengal since 2014, but TMC has years of experience behind it. But even apart from this, the other thing that worked in the TMC's favor was its focus on women voters. And Shantanu says that this was even evident in its campaign slogan.
The TMC has projected in its new election slogan that Bangla Nijer Meke Chai, which means that Bengal wants its own daughter. The TMC gave the thrust on the women because Mamata Banerjee happens to be the only women chief minister in the entire country. And she gave stress to the women empowerment, more rights to the women. And Amit Shah has clearly said that a Bhumiputra or the son of the soil will become the chief minister. So this was a battle of son and daughter. If you see clearly, because we haven't seen any strong female leader of the BJP in Bengal. They had also dependent on Smriti Irani, union minister, who can speak Bengali very well. She also campaigned in the state, but she also kept herself limited only on attacking Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, not projecting face or women face on behalf of her party. So this is a kind of battle, the daughter versus son battle, which were there, which the party did not give importance to. But I think that have contributed massively in this election.
Shantanu also points out that in the 2019 general elections, the TMC had got around 43% vote share. This time, though, it got 48%. That's a 5% increase.
For an incumbent government, which is battling 10 years of anti-incumbency, increase of 5% vote is a huge advantage. And a lot of the people would say that the women voters of the Bengal have really voted for Mamata Banerjee because of this pro-women image.
Now, because of the lack of a strong leader, the lack of organizational strength, and women not voting in their favor, the other thing that worked against the BJP was the Muslim voters. The community comprises nearly 30% of the state's population, and their vote is always crucial in the state. But BJP didn't try to field their vote. In fact, it appeared to be campaigning in a way that they don't require the community's vote to win. Plus, like mentioned in the beginning, a large part of their campaign was focused on Hindutva politics, polarization, and chants of Jai Shri Ram, and this really went against them. Shantanu explains how.
The answer is twofold. One is the consolidation of Muslim votes in favor of the TMC, because the more you indulge in the polarization campaign, the another thing that is certain is that consolidation of the minority votes for one party or multiple parties. This time, what had happened, because the minority votes are predominantly with the TMC, a large chunk of that. But this time, the left and Congress, which have completely decimated in the West Bengal Assembly post result this time, because they have failed to win a single seat, both the Congress and the left front. Their traditional minority vote banks have gone to the TMC. In districts of Malda and Murshidabad being the highest populated minority dominated district, TMC has won 18 seats out of the 20. 18 seats. And in Malda, TMC have won 8 seats out of the 12. So this has clearly shown that the traditional vote bank of the Congress and the left has gone, especially the Congress in Malda and Murshidabad, have gone to the TMC. This is the one part of the answer. Another part of the answer is that in Bengal, this communal polarization doesn't work in that way, which could work in Uttar Pradesh or in other states. I'll tell you why. Because here the Hindus are mostly very open-minded, and they don't harbor this kind of animosity towards any particular religion or particular castes. Here, if you want to polarize the entire Hindu votes, the chances are that you will not be able to do that beyond a certain point.
He says that the BJP had essentially banked on the 70% voters who are Hindu, but a large chunk of them ended up voting for the TMC. And even apart from the religious polarization, Shantanu also points to the caste factor in the state.
BJP focused too much on caste politics in West Bengal. They brought issues like CAA, SC votes, Mathuas, Rajbanshis, Dalits, because the people in West Bengal are not familiar with caste politics. Because here we do not talk about Dalits, who is a SC, who is a ST. Because if you see the history of West Bengal, there hasn't been any violence related to caste violence, like honor killings and all. We haven't seen that. And the people of Bengal have always been subject to political violence, but they have not seen caste violence, caste-based violence, which we see elsewhere. So this is another reason why this divide between castes did not work for the BJP, because they did not understand what the Bengalis actually want. They don't want a division. They don't want a society where one would harbor hatred towards each other. This is where the BJP read the election wrong. Because a large number of Hindus, what we are seeing, has gone with the TMC because there is 30% Muslim votes. Even if that 27 and 28% have gone with the TMC, 20% of the Hindus are still with the TMC. So you have to see that in a broader aspect that the BJP has failed to read this election.
Now, the other thing that we mentioned in the beginning was that the TMC was facing anti-incumbency. There were a lot of allegations of corruption, and people have been frustrated with the cut money system, where people have to pay bribes to avail government welfare schemes. But the fact that there were welfare schemes and cash transfers for girls, for the unemployed, for minorities, this really did make a difference. In fact, Shantanu says that TMC's campaign was mainly based around its development schemes.
Like, for example, they talked about Duare Sarkar, which is a government at your doorstep program. Then they talk about the Shastro Sathi scheme, which is the universal healthcare scheme for every people of the West Bengal. Then they talk about the other schemes, social welfare schemes, which reach to the poor. And they also talk about the cash transfer of 10,000 rupees to buy tabs or mobile phones for the students who are studying in 12th standard. Because the TMC knew that the BJP will target it with allegations of corruption, cut money and all. To subside these, they focus solely on the development. And for that, they were preparing to take steps 2 years ahead of that. Because they lost 12 seats in 2019 Lok Sabha polls. After that, they brought in political strategist Prashant Kishore. And since that, we have seen a lot of initiatives which were aimed at changing this perspective against the TMC. Because the BJP was going to come after the TMC with these charges. So this is where the TMC worked really hard, and these have reflected in this election campaign as well, because we see that charges of allegations, corruptions, people did not really give much importance to that. Otherwise, the TMC would have fared badly in districts where these scams had most of the impacts, like for Cyclone Amphan Relief Fund scam, which was mostly had an impact in South Chobbish Pargana district. This election result shows that out of 31 seats, TMC had won 30 seats. So it's almost a clean sweep, and the only seat they lost to against the Indian Secular Front candidate is the one seat they have lost in the entire district. In Howrah district, TMC made a clean sweep, 16 seats, and the Amphan corruption charges were also there in this district.
He says that this clearly shows that people chose TMC despite the corruption allegations. Some reports from the ground also show that even though corruption has been an issue, people were perhaps worried of losing these welfare schemes altogether if another party came to power. Now, we mentioned earlier how BJP focused a lot on the corruption within the TMC. But at the same time, BJP had fielded candidates from the TMC. In fact, most of its party workers are either from the TMC or the left. And Shantanu says that this played a major role in why the BJP didn't win. It was their selection of candidates.
Because we have seen for days and days, there were protests in Kolkata, in the districts, burning of party offices, tearing off of posters, because they were not happy with the selection of candidates. Old-timers were not happy because we have seen that more than 50 turncoats were given. Turncoats means the persons who have come from the TMC were given election tickets. And most of the cases, these turncoats have failed to win the election. If you see that strong leaders like Rajiv Banerjee, Rabindranath Ghosh, those were from the TMC, Vaishali Dalmia, Rathin Chakravarti, Jitendra Tiwari, all have lost the election, barring Shubhendu Adhikari, who have just won the election by a margin of just 2,000 votes against Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, is also not seen in the media, not celebrating his victory because his party has not made that kind of impact which the people had thought they would. So the turncoat ministers have failed to win the election in BJP's favor, because the BJP, on the other hand, had put so much confidence in these leaders to make a turnaround. If you give the example, 4 former TMC leaders from the Howrah district had joined the BJP and they were made candidates in the Howrah district. TMC had made clean sweep in Howrah district. In South Chobbish Pargana district, 4 to 5 TMC lesser known leaders were made BJP candidates. They have failed to win the election. In Bardhaman, in Nadia, in everywhere, these TMC turncoats have let the BJP down. So this is another reason why the BJP have done poorly in this election.
And besides fielding candidates from the party that they call corrupt, Shantanu says that the BJP also did not pay importance to Bengali culture and language. Like their leaders came and spoke Hindi in their rallies. And he cites other examples too.
When the BJP candidate list was announced, it was announced from the Delhi main office, the candidates' names were written in Hindi and in English. There was no mention of Bengali language. Their names were not given in Bengali. And we see the central government schemes and projects which are taking place in Kolkata and around. At the signage, the Hindi gets more prominence in the names of the stations, names of the trains and all. And we have seen that in the Shantiniketan Express, Dindal Express, and the pictures of Rabindranath Tagore went missing. And then after a lot of criticism, they had to put back the pictures. So the people thought that the Bengali culture or the Bengali sentiment was not given that respect that it deserves, because we have seen after the formation of the new education policy, Bengali was kept out of the classical languages, and that did not go well with the people of Bengal. And BJP understood that, because they made the promise in its election manifesto that they would turn Bengali as the classical languages of the country. But the people had a question, because if you want to do it, then you could have done this while sitting at the center. You don't have to form a government in Bengal to do that. So there were questions were raised about the intent of the BJP in giving importance to the Bengali culture, Bengali sentiment, and also the Bengali language.
Plus, he says that Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, during campaigning, said that the BJP would form Romeo squads in the state, something that people in the state don't favor. He says that in Bengal, the politics of polarization doesn't work as well. So just to recap, we have talked about TMC's welfare schemes, BJP's lack of a chief ministerial face, it fielding candidates from the TMC, women voters going against them, BJP's politics of polarization not working to the extent they thought it would, and the party not being mindful of Bengali culture. But besides these, there is another point that to a certain extent went against the BJP, and that is its current COVID-19 mismanagement at the center. Especially because these polls happened when the country was seeing a massive COVID-19 wave, and yet rallies were taking place in thousands and polls happened in 8 phases.
Because after 4th round of polls, which was on April 10, we started to see a rise in the number of COVID incidents. By the time the 5th phase polling was held on April 17, it has risen exponentially, and the TMC had already started criticizing the Election Commission for not clubbing the remaining phases. They wrote several letters to the Election Commission asking the Election Commissions to club the remaining 3 phases into one phase, or if not possible, club the remaining 2 phases, that is the 7th and 8th phases, into a single phase. But we have not seen any kind of demand from the BJP on these regards. They kept on saying that we believe in the Election Commission, we will support what the Election Commission will announce, but they never said that they want the election campaign to be shortened due to the rise in COVID numbers. This also sent a very bad message to the voters of the Bengal, because at the one hand, Mamata Banerjee was trying to put an end to the campaigning, wanted the election campaigning to be shorter. The BJP, on the other hand, insisted that it should continue as it was announced earlier. So this has sent a very bad message to the people, or I could say wrong message to the people. And for the last 3 phases, when the COVID cases have skyrocketed, we have seen there is dearth of oxygen supply in hospitals in the national capital or hospitals in the Uttar Pradesh or elsewhere. These had a serious impact on the Bengal elections, because we have seen that the last 3 phases, the TMC has won most of the seats. If you take into account the last 2 phases, which were held on April 26 and April 29, 35 seats and 36 seats where the polls were held, TMC won 28 seats in each of these rounds. So in the last 2 phases, the TMC has won 56 seats.
This, he says, shows that COVID-19 really may have been on the mind of the voters, especially because the situation in Delhi and UP was being covered everywhere during that time. The other thing that has stood out in this election is what happened in the Nandigram seat, which has historical significance for the TMC. Mamata Banerjee contested from this seat and was in opposition to Suvendu Adhikari, her former protege who left the TMC to join the BJP. Nandigram was a matter of prestige for Mamata Banerjee, but she lost from this seat. The battle was close though, and Adhikari won by a margin of 2,000 votes.
The TMC can say that the BJP doesn't have the bragging right to celebrate this election result, because Shubhendu Adhikari had said that I will defeat Mamata Banerjee by a margin of 50,000 votes. But that margin has come down to 2,000. So they don't have the bragging right now. But yes, it's a loss to the Mamata Banerjee, who had said that he will not contest from any other seats in these assembly elections. Now that the rule says that she will have to contest in the assembly election from any other seats within the 6 months to retain the chief minister, because she is going to be the chief minister for the third time. That we know for sure. So we are waiting for a bypoll, so where she will contest the election. But yes, the TMC, yes, it was a setback for the Mamata Banerjee, because she had delivered her party's biggest win ever after coming to power in 2011. Because TMC last time in 2016 had won 211 seats, and this time it is winning 213 or 214, because we have to see the results. This kind of seats, and the highest vote share ever, 48%. But for the BJP, it has a face now as an opposition leader, because all the big heavyweights have lost, as I said earlier: Babul Supriyo, Lokesh Chaudhary, Shapon Dasgupta, Rahul Sinha, Shamik Bhattacharya. All the big heavyweight BJP has lost. Now they have leaders like Mukul Roy, who is also former number 2 of the TMC, and now the Shubhendu Adhikari, former lieutenant of the TMC, as the main face of the BJP in West Bengal Assembly. So it's like, if any one of the two leaders become the leader of the opposition, then it would sound like the Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee is the Chief Minister, and the opposition leader is also from our own party, either Shubhendu or the Mukul Roy. So this is the situation right now. So definitely that the BJP can have a good opposition face with Shubhendu Adhikari winning this Nandigram seat.
Now, so far we have only talked about the TMC and the BJP. And that is because, like Shantanu mentioned earlier, the Congress and the left failed to win a single seat this time. This has never happened in the history of Bengal before. He says that it is hard for a lot of people to even imagine politics without the presence of the left and the Congress, because they have always played a role in the state. And especially for the left, which ruled Bengal for 34 years, this is an existential threat.
Same goes to the Congress also. Congress, after losing power in 1977 to the left, each was not that dominant force in West Bengal. This is primarily the reason why Mamata Banerjee had formed her new party. She was with the Congress till 1997. She had formed Trinamool Congress with the idea, with the belief that the Congress was not seriously contesting against the left front. That's why the formation of the Trinamool Congress had happened. And we have seen after 13 years since formation of the Trinamool Congress, it came to power. The Congress, which was an ally of the Trinamool Congress in 2011, after that, they were completely decimated in elections after elections. And one can say that the same leaders who had contesting elections for the last 20, 30 years, people are not putting their faith on these leaders. So the people of Bengal have this time clear mind to vote either for the BJP or the TMC. They were not going to waste their votes on parties which will no longer come to the power in West Bengal.
He also says that the other thing that worked against the left, which is seen as a secular party, was that it joined hands with the Indian Secular Front, which is seen as a communal party. So a lot of people who would have voted for the left voted instead for the TMC. Plus now, BJP has established itself as a stronger party organizationally as compared to the left and the Congress.
They have open party offices, IT cells in every district, everywhere. If you go to the districts, visit the areas, you can see that there is a party office of the BJP. There's posters of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Union Minister Amit Shah, JP Nadda. At the same time, it would be very difficult for you to find proper party offices of the CPM and the Congress in everywhere. I mean, not saying the roadside party offices, but the proper party offices with all the infrastructure and all. So this goes to show that that CPM and the Congress is lacking on its resources, and they fail to make any impact in these elections, because clearly the people this time has decided that we will not waste our votes on any other parties other than the BJP or the TMC. So if you want to support the TMC, then vote for the TMC. If you are against the TMC, then vote for the BJP. clearly there was a clear idea that BJP is the primary opposition party which can actually fight against the TMC. So people have voted for the BJP. So that is the reason the BJP has emerged as the main opposition party in West Bengal. Although they did not get the result as they had desired, they had thought about winning over 200 seats. But yes, they have gone to 76 or 77 seats right now. So this is one kind of an achievement, that because they can put a serious pressure on the TMC government in the West Bengal Assembly.
Now, with the defeat in Bengal, there are lessons that this election holds for the BJP. Also because apart from Assam, the party did not make any impact in Tamil Nadu and Kerala this time. To know what these lessons are, we spoke to Liz Mathew, who writes on the BJP for the newspaper.
So when we are talking about the lessons BJP has learned from this along with other assembly elections, increasingly it is proven that the political capital Prime Minister Narendra Modi has had in 2019 or Lok Sabha elections, the BJP is not able to repeat it in the state elections. That we have seen in the state assembly elections since 2019. The BJP could not perform very well in any of these elections except in Assam when the result came yesterday, where they returned to power with a landslide majority. That was the only state BJP could do well in the last few years in terms of assembly elections. That is one thing. And, BJP as a national party at the center, people are accepting, people are appreciating what Mr. Narendra Modi has been doing and his decisive leadership. People have admiration for that. But when it comes to state politics, when there are parties like regional parties rooted in the state, the narrative and the state culture, the electorate prefer those parties or the local regional leaders.
She says the mistake was to pit Mamata Banerjee against Narendra Modi, when the Prime Minister's image is taking a beating both nationally and internationally because of the COVID-19 crisis. Plus, like we discussed earlier, the BJP tried to impose its Hindutva narrative in Bengal, which didn't work. And by doing that, it made itself look like an outsider, despite the groundwork that the party had done.
When I went to Bengal, when I was watching the roadshows, Home Minister Amit Shah was leading or Amit Shah was present, I could feel that people's distancing, common people's distancing, who were jubilant on the road and raising slogans were only BJP cadre or BJP supporters. The general public, whose vote is very crucial in any elections, general public was just watching and they were just mute spectators. So, and that distancing in their body language was very clear. And I'm sure BJP has learned this lesson of not projecting Prime Minister as versus the regional leader or the chief minister of belonging to a rival party in the state in the upcoming elections.
But when it comes to Bengal, despite losing, being the main opposition in the state now is what the party has really gained. This election is being compared to the 2019 general election. And if we do that, we'll find that the BJP has lost 2% of the vote share. But if we compare it to the last state elections, then the BJP has gained a lot of ground. From 3 seats, it has now gained 77. And from a 10% vote share, it has now come to 38%. And Liz tells us that the BJP says that it made tall claims of winning 200 seats to boost the morale of the party workers. And the result is really a victory for them.
Haar mein jeet hai. This is the slogan they are, or this is the line they have taken up. From 3 seats and 10%, they have come to 77 seats and 38% vote. They are the only opposition party in the assembly. So BJP is saying that we have emerged as the credible single opposition party in the state. So that is the next alternative. So party is not giving up. Obviously, it is they didn't have anything to lose there. They had only gained. And comparing the assembly election with the Lok Sabha election, especially when the party BJP has a leader like Narendra Modi, I think it is unfair. So you should compare it with the last assembly elections. And from there, they have come to really far.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.